For all verified facts, subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Hello and welcome. The sixth assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has said that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, ocean and land. Widespread and rapid changes have been brought about in the atmosphere, ocean, cyclosphere and biosphere have occurred. And the scale of these changes are unprecedented over many centuries to many thousands of years. Human-induced change, and that's the most important part here, is already affecting many weather and climate extremes in every region across the globe, as we can see right around us. So just to give you one example, continued global warming is projected to further intensify the global water cycle, including its variability, global monsoon precipitation, something that we feel in many parts of India, for example, and the severity of wet and dry events. So, global surface temperatures will continue to rise. Many of these changes are because of greenhouse gas emissions and other changes that we brought about, which are resulting in sea levels going up and Arctic ice receding. So, what does this all mean? And why is this more important today than ever before? To discuss this, I'm joined by Dr. Arunabha Ghosh, the founder and CEO of the Council on Energy, Environment and Water. Arunabha, thank you very much for joining us. So, first question, there's been a lot of excitement, if that's the word, over this new report that's come out from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So, who are these guys?
Govind, thanks for having me. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was formed in the late 1980s and basically since the early 1990s, it has been providing the scientific basis of the discussions we have on climate change. Now, this is basically a network of thousands of climate scientists who could be scientists in the sort of natural or physical climate space, but they could also be social scientists looking at the economic or the social impacts of climate change, or even technologists who are looking at ways to get out of the challenges that we are facing. And what they do is periodically every 6-7 years, they bring out these assessment reports that look at the physical science of climate change, the impacts, and the ways to mitigate or adapt to this challenge. What they do is they scan thousands of the latest research, peer-reviewed research, and then they try to provide for policymakers their best understanding or their best advice on how to move forward.
Right. Now, there are a few data points. Now, the data points I'm assuming are not new in themselves. So, what's changed? And when I say data points, I mean the rise in sea levels, the temperature rise, 0.8 to 1.3 degree increase between 1850 and 1910 and 2010 and 2019 as a band. So, what's new here?
So, the first thing that's new is that with each report, each assessment report, and this is the sixth, you get more and more confidence, scientific confidence in what you're saying. And this one particularly has come out very strongly saying effectively there is no doubt now that the temperature rises that we're experiencing are because of what is called anthropogenic or human-induced climate change. It's because of the emissions we are putting forward. Of the 1.09 centigrade of warming that has already happened compared to the pre-industrial era, only 0.01 centigrade is because of natural causes. So that's one thing. The second thing that has become very clear from this report is what is called through attribution science. We're able to now get a better sense of not just the long-term changes in the climate, but also how does a particular event get exacerbated or even get likely because of climate change. And there's a lot around that attribution science. The third thing that's new here is the analysis with regards to the carbon space that's available, because with each assessment, we are looking at how much more emissions are there in the atmosphere. And now to stay within, say, 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming, we basically have a carbon space only of about 300 to 500 gigatons that's available of carbon dioxide. So these are all ways in which I would call the narrowing of the margin of error has become more evident.
Right.
That we do not have any time now to waste, and we do not have any time now to doubt.
Right, and I would ask you to quantify that for us. And before you do that, the figure that I have from the same report is that atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations are higher than any time in 2 million years. And for other gases, including nitrogen, it's higher than 800,000 years. And there's been a big rise since 1750, which I guess goes back to the pre-industrial era. So tell us about the quantification of what can go wrong. I mean, how does one feel it today? And how does one try and project, particularly as a layperson?
No, this is a very important question, because most of us as human beings will say, well, even on a daily basis, we experience these shifts in temperature, right? I live in the National Capital Region, and we have temperature variations of 30, 40 degrees over the course of the year. But I think, jokes aside, it's important to understand that this is an average change in temperature, in global surface temperatures. Now, how does this actually impact the layperson? It affects us through the associated impact. So it's not about whether you're feeling warmer. It gets, in terms of, say, in a hot tropical country like India, heat stress becomes very, very critical. And that basically means that we are looking at, say, millions of jobs that are required to be performed outside in the heat will get affected. By 2030 in India alone, we will have a severe loss of the jobs that are possible in the open, which has an economic impact. Another way this impacts is the extreme weather events. So between 1990 and now, India itself has faced more than 300 extreme events, which has cost us more than 5.6 lakh crore in terms of losses. And this is just the past. The future is going to get worse. The third way in which this impacts us is actually what I would call the tertiary impacts. So how do vector-borne diseases become more prominent? How do your basic infrastructure becomes less effective? So if your bridges get destroyed by extreme climate events and so forth, then you are facing a compounded problem of the economic and social costs you're enduring. So that is this daily engagement that we have with not just weather variation, but a systemic change in the way we run our lives.
And I mean, you've described how vulnerable India is, and is India likely to be, or is it more vulnerable than many other countries, including developed countries?
It is more vulnerable. And what is vulnerability? It is a function of the physical climate risk, your economic conditions as an individual or a community, and the administrative capacity to respond, right? So obviously, if I were a millionaire in Malibu in California, my home might get flooded because of the physical risk. But I have my own economic insurance cushion, and I can rely on the emergency services to show up. When you're talking about a fishing community on the coast of Odisha, the story becomes very different. What we have already seen, Govind, is that 3/4 of India's districts are now what would be considered hotspots for extreme climate events. What is more worrying, at least for me, is that 40% of our districts are now showing trends of shifting from being flood prone to drought prone, or vice versa. So when you're building up your own resilience or building up administrative capacity, what capacity are you building? Are you building capacity to fight floods in a drought prone area? Or are you building capacity to deal with drought in a traditionally flood prone area? And these things make us therefore more vulnerable in that combination of the physical, the economic, and the administrative.
Right, and I'd love to talk about solutions, but we will do that in a separate interview. But last question, the rich countries have obviously contributed to this and are continuing to contribute. And I think your own data shows that they've continued to emit more than what they'd committed to reduce. So how do you see the role of, particularly as you look back in the last 15 years, the role of the rich or richer countries versus countries like India in improving or finding a solution?
I think it is very evident, Govind, that the rich countries have nowhere come close to reducing the emissions that they had themselves promised to do. Put together, all rich countries have emitted about 25 gigatons extra between 2008 and 2020 than what they were permitted. And this extra 25 gigatons is effectively 9 years of India's emissions, or half the world's emissions in a single year. Now, when we look to the future, and as I was mentioning earlier, we have a narrowing carbon space. It's that carbon space that has been eaten up by these extra 25 billion tons, and of course, everything else that they have emitted. So I think the most important thing they have to do right now is, on one hand, become far more aggressive in terms of their own emissions reduction plans, and secondly, aim for net negative emissions. Net negative emissions means you're sucking carbon out of the atmosphere, sequestering it in trees or wherever, and thereby opening up a little bit more of that carbon space for the others. But as I've also argued, that does not give all of us in developing countries an unmitigated right to pollute. We also have to get onto a cleaner pathway, because it's in our own interests. It is we who are suffering.
Right. Dr. Arunabha Ghosh of the CEEW, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Govind.